Welcome to the 10-12, the this week live show that covers all 16 teams in the Big 12 conference. We are the flagship show of the 10-12 network. Find every show on the network at 1012network.com. That's TEN, the number 12, the word network. And of course, we are partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip Slavin. Thank you for joining us for Rankings Week. Something new I wanted to do this summer since I knew we were going to be cutting back. I wanted to go big with something different. Normally, we have our position group rankings every off season. We usually rank offensive line and defensive line and wide receiver. We've kind of mixed that up last year. And I wanted to do something different. I still wanted some rankings this week. And so we have 5 nights in a row. Tonight, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have guests on every night. We're doing 5 different rankings groups. I'm very excited for it. Very excited for them. It's going to be a ton of fun. I'm thrilled. I am thrilled. And so if you are watching this live, welcome. Please hop in the chat, join in. Let us know your thoughts, your comments. If you're listening to this the next day in podcast form, of course, leave us 5 stars and a review. If you've got questions, 1012podcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter. I will not call it the other name, at 1012 Network. Instagram and Threads is 1012pod. Today, our first night of rankings. We are going to do the 10 most impactful transfer portal players in the Big 12 this season. Now, I'm not doing this myself. As I said, we have fantastic guests joining me for what feels like the 20th year in a row. And I mean that in the best way possible, because every year I do rankings of a position group. Joe has been here for it. And Joe has switched up which position group he has ranked each time. And so today he's joining us to do some transfer portal, because I know Joe knows what he's talking about. I know Joe pays attention. Joe's out here doing team previews on his YouTube channel, which you should absolutely go and check out. I know Kansas State's on there. I watched it. It's really dang good. Joe, welcome back to the 10-12, bud.
Thank you for having me. I mean, we were just talking about that. Every year it's a blast. It's something new, and it switches things up, but also I think that's what I enjoy most about it is you're never getting the same thing over and over again. You get something different, and that spices things up a little bit.
I like spicing things up. That's good. That's good. I like that. I like that a lot. I am going to pull up YouTube and just make sure this is actually going where I think it's supposed to be going. Look, I'd like to say that I'm completely, totally up to speed on things. But look, folks, I turned 40 this year. And so sometimes I'm good with technology and sometimes I'm not. It happens. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, we have our rankings. We're going to go through our rankings list, Joe and myself together. I'm very excited for this. Joe, as our guest, and again, if anybody has any thoughts, anybody's watching wants to chime in. Hey, you didn't include this person. Hey, that person's too high, that person's too low. Hit us up in the comments. We would love to hear your thoughts tonight. So let's get this ball rolling. Let's get this kick started. Joe, I know we're supposed to do like 10-1. That's the way this is supposed to go. That's no fun. That's no fun. For SEO purposes, right? We'll just start at number 1. All right. Who is number 1 on your list? Who is going to be, to you, the most impactful transfer player in the Big 12 this season?
So this is kind of tough. I originally had, 55 guys on this list, and I was trying to decide what was going to be my criteria for putting the list together. And when you say most impactful, I tried to look at it as like not who is the best transfer coming in, but who's going to make the biggest impact. And I think some of these bottom feeder teams from last year brought in players that are going to make a sizable jump. It doesn't mean they're going to be elite, but I think that you'll notice a big difference in play. So for me, number 1 was going to be DeQuan Finn going from Toledo to Baylor. I think with what Baylor needs to do for Dave Aranda to keep his job, you need the quarterback play to be better. And I think that has been something that has lacked for the Baylor Bears. You obviously have a change on the offense coming into 2024, and you bring in a quarterback that improved as a passer last year. I think one of the things we saw with Finn was we wanted to see him be more consistent as a passer. We obviously know what he's capable of doing with his legs, but he is someone who improved throwing the football as well. And when you look at the talent that they have at the wide receiver position, I think that DeQuan Finn is set to have a huge year for Baylor and take a huge step forward for that offense in general.
So as we do this, I'm gonna make a change here on the fly, and as opposed to me waiting till DeQuan Finn shows up later in my poll, which he is in my top 10, he's just not number one. I think I will respond so that we can just go ahead and talk to DeQuan Finn now. We don't have to rehash all of this later. That just seems a bit silly. I have him on my list, but I have him at number 6 on my list. And I like your thought process of biggest impact. You know, it's okay if we're talking about some teams who have lower expectations. People aren't as high on them this season, but that doesn't mean that that player can't have a massive impact. And look, if he's really good for Baylor, it could drastically change expectations for Baylor. Like it just could. And that would be massive if he comes in and is everything that Baylor needed. I think back to last year, and you mentioned him as a passer, developing as a passer, and that being a big deal. I think the biggest thing for Baylor versus what we've seen from them at quarterback last year, right? Blake Shapen was the quarterback. You saw Sawyer Robertson come in at one point. Is this offense does need someone, I think, who is a bit more mobile. And I think getting DeQuan Finn, who we can say needs to continue to improve as a passer, outside of like 2 quarterbacks in college football, everyone can. But knowing that you have that extra element, like they could have really used on offense last year a quarterback with some legs, and they didn't really have that. I think that would have been big for them. I think it would have been an extra, or really helped them out, especially early on when they were losing close games. So I look at Baylor and say they need a quarterback who can be more for them, right? If you're going to put everything on the quarterback, which it kind of felt like the offense did last year, but he can only do one thing, and he did it well, but he can only do one thing. That's really, really hard. Like he has got to be just an absolute elite passer. So to get somebody in with the legs that DeQuan Finn has the experience that he has played as long as he has, is as talented as we think he is. Like I think this was one of the most exciting transfer portal announcements of this offseason, was finding out he was going to Baylor, because it did feel like it really elevates Baylor's potential this season. Still not sure what to expect with everything else going on. You've got him at 1. I've got DeQuan Finn at 6. He's definitely, I don't think I've seen a list that talks about transfers in Big 12 that doesn't have DeQuan Finn on it somewhere. So we agree as far as top 10 goes, just different in our positioning. Okay. If anybody watching, hi Finn, you love DeQuan Finn. Joe's right. I'm wrong. I'm right. Joe's wrong. Let's hear it. I look, it's all fun and games. So let's enjoy this. All right. I like the way that we're doing this. So for you, Joe, who is number 2 on your list?
So number 2 could have easily been number 1, because I have KJ Jefferson going from Arkansas to UCF. I just think that when you look at Gus Malzahn's offense, you know exactly kind of the quarterback that you require to have success. And obviously you saw what John Rice Plumlee could do, and you knew the limitations with his game as well. And now you just bring an absolute massive human being at the quarterback position who is actually really athletic. I think that's one thing that surprises people about KJ Jefferson, is his athleticism for a guy that's pushing 250 pounds at the quarterback position. Just a huge guy who can move with quick feet. And I think that fits well in UCF's offense. You also pair him with RJ Harvey. You also get Penny Boone to come in. So those are 2 guys that are going to be a problem running the football as well. And I think KJ gives them an element that they didn't have last year. Now, he does need to improve as a passer, but I think his passing will be better than what we saw from Plumlee. And obviously losing Timmy McClain hurts for UCF. So Jefferson's arrival is very impactful because of what they lost. And I think that when you look at the rushing attack, obviously he's going to make an impact there. But also, this is an offense that should be really, really fun to watch throw the football as well. You have, even without Javon Baker, You have guys like Kobe Hudson coming back. So the passing attack should be pretty electric as well. And if Jefferson can figure out the system early and often, then I think this offense is going to be a major problem for a team that I believe is going to be a contender in the Big 12 this year.
I have him number 1. So you have him at 2. This is who I have at 1 is KJ Jefferson. And every time I've said that I have decided that UCF is my dark horse Big 12 team this year, because I see a lot of upside. And also and I think Gus Malzahn is a really, really, really good coach, but I also understand Gus Malzahn's calling the offense. Okay. And there's questions on defense, but one of the reasons I see the upside for them is because of KJ Jefferson. And the pushback I always get from people is did you watch him play last year? I live in Arkansas. I pay attention to Arkansas. I have watched a lot of KJ Jefferson play football. If you're claiming KJ Jefferson, if your only example of KJ Jefferson is last year, when Sam Pittman brought in Dan Enos to be the offensive coordinator, which is square peg round hole when you take KJ Jefferson and Dan Enos and try and make that work and make that a good offense. I don't know what to tell you. You've just not watched KJ Jefferson. You went and looked at his stats last year and said he's no good. Y'all, he is phenomenal. And not only is he really good, he is an absolute perfect fit for Gus Malzahn. I mean, when he went to the transfer portal, I thought it'd be really cool if he went there. He'd thrive there. And then he did. And I'm like, this is the kind of player to me who can go to a location with the offensive weapons that they have, with an offense that runs the ball well anyway, and knowing that you have 2 absolute dynamite running backs on that offense so that he doesn't have to be the guy running the ball, because Arkansas had some struggles as far as running backs goes. RJ Harvey is phenomenal. And Boone, who's not in my top 10, I'm just saying that. I'm just putting this out there now. And not that he's not a great player, but RJ Harvey is the beast and the best there. KJ Jefferson can do so much for this team. If, in my opinion, the reason I have him number 1 overall is if UCF is in the Big 12 championship game in Arlington, it's because KJ Jefferson is the quarterback at UCF. That's my thought. Okay.
That's a great thought. I agree, because when you look at when Enos came in, I think people were just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. You have KJ. But everything that I read and heard coming out of Arkansas was, oh, Enos wants to do this. It wasn't, here's how we want to use Jefferson's strengths. And that was the one thing that I think Kendall Briles did really well, is he's like, I'm going to do what my quarterback does really well. Whereas Enos is like, this is my system. This is what we're going to do. And I think that, kind of to your point, Malzahn is going to fit his offense around what Jefferson does really well.
Yes, Brian Metcalf, in the space unis, watch out. Don't y'all, who is it? It's the space game. I think it's Arizona. Yeah, Arizona fans don't know what they're in for yet. They just don't know. They don't know about the legend of the space game. All right. So Joe, with that said, number 3, who do you have number 3 on your list?
Number 3, yeah, I'm going to the defensive side of the ball. Everything that I've heard coming out of TCU was that LaMareon James from Old Dominion is making a monster impact already. I had a big year for the Monarchs, the team that I sent out a number of transfers to the power, whatever, 4, 5, 3, 2, whatever number we're putting after power now level. And Old Dominion's done a really good job of producing some big time playmakers. And LaMareon James, to me, had the talent to be an impact player. And with TCU's secondary kind of taking a step back last year, I think that they needed someone to help guys like Bud Clark step up. And I think that LaMareon James is going to have a big year for the Horned Frogs.
I don't have him on my list. So this is our first time we don't have someone on here. I do have a TCU player. He will come up later. Maybe we'll talk about him sooner if he's on yours, but I don't have him. That is an interesting one, and one to definitely keep an eye on. So I will go with my number 3 then, since we are different here. I have left tackle Easton Kilty coming in from North Dakota to Kansas State. Offensive line for Kansas State, of course, last year was one. It was like everyone, the top 10 offensive linemen were all back. We talked about how great that was and how impactful that was, and it was huge for Kansas State last year. Kansas State fans want to push back on this with me of like, get these guys have been playing, got all these experience, have been back, but they haven't been the starters. Like you've lost like all the starters. Like you lost a ton off a really deep offense. Like we've got a bunch of guys, they've all played, they've had snaps, they've had this many snaps in their career, they've had this many. I get all that. And I have nothing but faith in Kansas State to develop an offensive line and Kleiman to do so. Like I don't think Kansas State's gonna like, oh, now they're the worst offensive line in the Big 12. Like, no, they're still gonna be good. But that they went out and got one of the absolute best offensive linemen out of the FCS. And of course, Kleiman's relationship out of the state of North Dakota, obviously he's very well aware and it has people he can reach out to there to bring him in on an offensive line that looks very different to be what is expected your starting left tackle. This is a Kansas State team who preseason pick number 2 in the conference, high expectations for them this year. And you got to go out there and try and make Avery Johnson look like the golden god that the people who love him think he is going to be this year. I got a lot of Avery Johnson stock. I'm still more of a slow pay next year kind of thing. But I think for him to come in and be successful, that you went into the portal and brought up an FCS offensive lineman to be your starting left tackle, that says a lot about him. That also says a lot about what you had to play left tackle at Kansas State this season. So I think it is huge because of how good we expect the run game, just like how good we expect this team to be, the expectations for them, and the run game, and AJ and Avery Johnson. Like I've got him at number 3 because I think if he is what we think he is, if he is what they brought him in to be, then Kilty is going to be hugely impactful in the Big 12 and at Kansas State this year.
Yeah, he's not on my list, but he was on the longer list of names that I put together. And in my deep dive, I kind of talked about how I like that addition. Obviously, when you lose Cooper Beebe, that's going to be a massive loss, but obviously he's playing the guard position versus tackle. But I think that getting him fits into that culture, kind of that underrated, nobody really wanted him sort of, mindset. And Kleiman's done a great job of building that culture, and you bring in a guy from the FCS level who fits in with that mindset already. That I think that the talent plus that mentality is going to be really good for a team that, is expected to be one of the favorites. And the offensive line is going to play a huge role if you're going to get DJ Giddens going, and the rushing attack, Avery Johnson comfortable. The offensive line obviously is where everything starts.
All right. We are 3 through so far, although I have also talked about my number 6. So let's move to number 4. Joe, I've got an interesting one, but I'm going to let you go first as that's the order. Who do you have at number 4?
Number 4, I actually have Josh Kelley going to Texas Tech. I really liked him at Fresno State. I've been a big Group of 5 guy for a long time, and watching him at Fresno State was really fun. I was excited to see what he could do at Washington State, and then he hits the transfer portal again, goes to Texas Tech to an offense that, assuming that Baron Morton can stay healthy and is ready to go, I think is going to be electric. I think that this passing attack has a ton of good options. You bring in Josh Kelley, you bring in Caleb Douglas to join Coy Eakin. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg for that offense. The passing attack is going to be electric, and Josh Kelley is a matchup nightmare to me.
I have him on my list. We agree to some extent. Again, I actually have it number 8 on my list. This is to me, it's interesting with Kelley because of that's not the guy everyone's focused on at wide receiver for Texas Tech, right? That's not the name everyone was talking about. But it's interesting to bring in a guy for a year where you are loading up this wide receiving core. Like it is, you have done everything you can to try and make this receiving core depth-wise solid, really talented, so that you can give Baron Morton every opportunity to succeed. It sounds like he's fine. There were a lot of concerns about health and getting well and what's he going to be like. Weird situation out of spring ball and so on and so forth. It sounds like he's going to be good. And I'm still big on it's Morton time, right? I'm all for it. I want to see it. But there's no excuse in bringing in someone like Josh Kelley who can just be a reliable and high impact kind of player for them. I think it's going to be big because I don't think he's going to be the guy that gets all the attention, But, sometimes even if you're just being that number 2 receiver, like how many times have we seen like the guy is awesome. That number 2, because that guy is awesome. Number 2 is just out there making play after play after play after play after play because he's not getting the top defensive back on him. I have him at number 8 because I do think that was a huge pickup. And I think that Josh Kelley is at worst the number 2 guy for Texas Tech this year in that receiving corps. All right. I need to give my number 4 because it is different.
Who's your number 2? I already forgot.
I forgot. I know. I realized that I forgot to give my number 2. So thank you for that. I have Darian Singer, wide receiver going from USC to Utah. And I think it's a sneaky one because obviously didn't do much at USC last season, right? He had transferred from Arizona where he was absolutely incredible. And think about if he had stayed at Arizona last year for last year's team, man, that would have been just imagine that wide receiver duo. But he could be for a Utah team that everyone thinks should win the Big 12. Massive. Had 1,105 yards on 66 catches and 6 touchdowns, 4 100-plus yard games back in 2022 when he was at Arizona. Again, didn't do much last year at USC. I don't care. I immediately think that guy is their top pass catcher outside of tight end. I think he's your number 1 wide receiver. I think he's your most talented wide receiver. And to get a guy who we have seen be incredibly successful. Again, what happened at USC? Don't know. Don't know what all went on there. But we've seen him be really good. Him going to Utah to play with Cam Rising, I think is massive. I think he can immediately make a huge impact on a team that has very high expectations. Healthy Cam Rising, right? I love Darian Singer at Utah, and I think it makes a ton of sense. I think he's going to be he's one of those guys where if you ask me, name somebody who wasn't preseason all Big 12 who you think could end the season all Big 12, I think Darian Singer could at wide receiver.
Yeah, I wanted to put him on my list, but I just couldn't after last year. Obviously, I don't know what happened at USC, but I think that there's
lots
still
of things happened at USC.
Right. Yeah, true. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't know where to place him. He was kind of one of those guys like, in my heart, I'm like, yes, top 10 impact player. But when you actually sit down and watch what happened, I just didn't know where to place him. So I kept him off, but I can see him being an impact player just because of how that offense works. I think the one big thing that I've seen in terms of concerns was the lack of separation and his requirement to win so many 50-50 contested passes. That's probably like the one biggest thing that I've seen, but I agree with you. He is someone who can be a major impact player, especially in that offense where everyone is really focused on running, where they're going to run the football and what they're going to do there. And then you open up play action, passing attack. You get a guy like Singer who has experience making big plays downfield and deep downfield. So I like that pick. I just wasn't sure where I could put him. So I ultimately kept him off of that list.
Watching a little of his Arizona thing, because I didn't watch a lot of Arizona in 2022, but like going through what he had done, watching some highlights, man, it's hard not to be excited. Okay, so I got to do my number 4. I cheated a little bit here. I put 2 guys at number 4, and you'll understand why, and you may already know why I did this. I hope I pronounce this right, Samuel Okunlula and Dayan Hayes, who are 2 defensive line transfers from Pitt who went to Colorado. Colorado went, hey, who's the 2 best guys at Pitt? There were high expectations for them at Pitt this season, and Colorado went, we're going to pay you more money to come here. And they went, yeah. And so now they come in to take over, in my opinion, what was at times a Sev. I can never pronounce that word correctly. I know how to spell it. I can spell it, but I can't say it. Of a defensive line at Colorado last year. Like, I think these guys are going to be huge for Colorado. Look, we can make jokes about Colorado all we want. There are a lot of questions about Colorado. I do think that they upgraded this roster this offseason. I do think, they lost some players they didn't want to, like Dylan Edwards. Maybe we'll talk about him in a bit. But I do think there are spots where they went back into the portal and brought in guys who were more talented than some of the guys on their roster last year. They still don't have a ton of depth. That's going to kill him by the end of the season. But I do think he has improved this roster. And these two guys together, Colorado had 28 sacks last season total. Hayes alone at Pitt had 10.5. Okay. These guys are far superior to what they had. And if that's at Colorado, if they can get better line play, because that was the question, is like, what's the offensive line going to look like? What's the defensive line? If they're going to have better line play, if these two guys make as big an impact at Colorado as they did when they were at Pitt, whole new defense. It's going to be even better. It's going to help make Travis Hunter look even better when he's playing in the secondary. I think these two guys will immediately show up to Colorado, make Colorado's defense better, especially on the defensive line play, which is going to go a long way in this conference of them trying to get to a bowl game.
Yeah, I agree. And when I put this list together, I was like, I could make a top 10 just with Colorado. Like, I have so many Colorado, and like, that's just the nature of it. But this year, and last year, I think when you look at what they brought in, you probably could have put together a top 10, but you might not have been super confident about that top 10. This year, when I actually went through and put it together, I'm like, okay, they actually have some solid additions here. And so I think that's exciting if you are a Colorado fan. And I think the one thing that people won't realize is Colorado, with how bad they were in certain areas, they don't necessarily need to all of a sudden become, top 25, top 40. They just need to be in the 60s to 80s, which is still a huge jump. But I think that you still have a group that's talented and has the potential to be good, but you don't need to just expect them to be elite all of a sudden. You need them to take, smaller steps to get to that point, but you have the talent to be able to do that. And you have two guys coming in from Pitt, a team that knows how to play defense and refuses to go back to the Kenny Pickett days for whatever reason on offense. So why not find a new home and go to a place like Colorado that needs help on the defensive line / the linebacker position. So I think that was a great set of additions by Dayan. And I think that the players that they brought in, it's different caliber of player that they brought in. And honestly, you could have put a lot of Colorado players on this list, which says a lot about the level of talent that they're bringing in. And funny enough, my 5 and 6 are actually two Colorado guys. So that's fitting that your 4 is two of those as well. So
we'll hit them. Let's hear 5 and 6. Let's hear those, because we know my 6 is DeQuan Finn. I can give my 5 in a minute. So give us both your 5 and 6, both your Colorado guys.
Perfect. So I like Hayes and I like Okunlula. I think that they'll be impact players. But I just looked at what did Colorado struggle with more so maybe than defensive line play, which is really sad, but also like there were definitely things, and running the football was not something Colorado even acknowledged at times. And I think that they just said, oh, well, Shedeur will figure it out. And that's great. Shedeur is very talented and can do that a lot of times, but you need to find balance. So bringing in Dallan Hayden to me from Ohio State is a huge addition. Obviously, you could put some offensive linemen on here, but I didn't really know if I'm overly excited about one offensive lineman that Colorado added. So maybe that's the one thing. I do think they'll be better, and that makes Hayden better as well. But Hayden's going to be more of that physical runner that they need. And on top of having hopefully better offensive line play, I think the rushing attack will be more of a factor in this offense, and they need it to be, especially because now they're moving on from Sean Lewis. They're going to more of, that pro style offense. So you're going to have to be physical, and you will have to run the football. And if you don't have the right running back in place, then you're going to be hurting. Now I'm worried about depth behind Hayden, but that's another story for another day. The other guy I brought in was DJ McKinney coming in from Oklahoma State. So I think that Travis Hunter obviously is a stud. We all know what he's capable of doing. But at the same time, when you watched last year, it's like, okay, well, Travis Hunter's on this side. Let's just scheme it up where we throw it to the other side, because the other side is just garbage for the most part. And there were a number of – I was just watching the Colorado State-Colorado game, and there were 4 or 5 passes where Torrey Horton's just lined up one-on-one on the other corner that's not Travis Hunter, and makes like one – it didn't even look like his best move. It was just a very average move, and he's 5 yards past his guy downfield. And it's like, well, that obviously is going to have to get fixed. So bringing in DJ McKinney to me was huge. I think that he's a good corner that will give Travis Hunter a lot of support. It'll make teams actually work through their progressions and have to try a little bit harder throwing the football against these guys. So to me, that was a big impact because now you don't have to rely on Travis to do everything, and you actually have a somewhat competent corner opposite of him.
As an Oklahoma State fan, let me just say, I did not like losing him from the defensive backfield. So props to Colorado. I look, I've watched quite a bit. He is a solid corner. Like, he is an upgrade. And again, like you said, I really think Colorado upgraded their roster a lot this offseason with the pieces they brought in. It does make their depth better because I think they brought in a lot of guys who were better than the starters. They lost some guys, absolutely. I still think some of the ones they've retained gives you at least a 2 deep that's starting to get a little bit more respectable. So I do think Colorado will be better this year, and it's because they brought in better top-line guys as starters for this season. I mean, we've just named 4 that I think are all going to be impact players and are all going to help Colorado. And heck, that might be the thing that gets Colorado to 6 wins this season, despite having what a heck of a schedule Colorado's going to face. But we're not going to talk about that here. You've done your 5 and 6, so I owe you a 5. Again, 6 was DeQuan Finn for me. I realize I have a lot of offensive people on this list, and that's okay. I'm taking running back at number 6, running back Jacory Crosby-Merritt, who came from New Mexico to Arizona. It's one of 2 impact running back or 2 transfer running backs for Arizona this season. He is expected to be the starter. I believe at one point he was committed to Ole Miss, if I remember correctly, and then switched to Arizona. Look, had an absolutely fantastic season for New Mexico last year. 1,190 yards on 189 carries, 6.3 yards per carry, 17 rushing touchdowns. That ranked 5th nationally. We all know how good Noah Fafita is, and I still feel like he's underrated. Teteroa McMillan, and I know I'm pronouncing the first round wrong. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get it down right. Like, you know that those 2 guys are gonna be awesome, but you gotta have a successful run game. And I think Arizona did a good job finding a complementary running back who we have seen put up a good season. I understand it's New Mexico, and I understand it's the Mountain West, and you can poo-poo that all you want. That guy was fantastic for them last season. Go watch some highlights. They're really fun to watch. And I don't care who you are. If you're averaging 6.3 yards per carry, you're a good running back, okay? Like, you just are. Like, that's a good number that you want to see from a running back, because that means you're getting first downs more often than not. Right. So I think it's a fantastic addition for Arizona. I think it's the perfect complementary piece to an offense that we already have high expectations for after losing your all your other running backs after last season. Like, I think he can have such a big impact for an Arizona team that people are still a little bit unsure about this season because of the coaching change. Like, I think he's one of those players. And look, the Big 12 is loaded at running back. He could have a phenomenal season this year and still be like the 6th best running back in the Big 12. It is the year of the running back in the Big 12. Like, if we were doing Chinese symbols, that's what it would be. But I still think for Arizona and for what they needed to be able to run the ball well, he was a fantastic addition for them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when people say, oh, well, you're in the Mountain West, I'm like, yeah, you're also on New Mexico. Can anybody name anybody from New Mexico outside of now Bronco Mendenhall's there? Like, no, you haven't paid attention to New Mexico. They're like the top team on everybody's college football 25 rebuild list because that's how bad they've been for so long. So if you're going to average 6.3 yards per carry on New Mexico, now granted, they had a couple of talented players, but like, to rush for almost 1,200 yards at New Mexico, one of the worst teams in the Mountain West for however long, like, that's probably your argument's almost negated because of how bad the team's been for so long. So if you have a season like that, it's definitely worth noting. Again, yeah, you're right. Arizona is kind of that team that probably the most volatile of the teams that are at the top, just because, yes, they are a team that could potentially win the conference, but this is also a team that could take a step back. We'll see what happens. I mean, who's going to be the Jacob Cowing player for this passing attack. Is Tedero McMillan going to have a 1,500-yard season, or is somebody else going to step up? We're still not sure who that guy is going to be. And obviously McMillan is a stud, but he's going to get extra attention. And you also can't just throw the ball every single play. So you need a rushing attack to kind of balance that out. You also bring in Quali Conley from San Jose State, follows Brent Brendan from there. So you're right. You have two solid running backs that are going to fly under the radar. And even in a deep conference, I think that they'll still be solid.
Speaking of solid and deep, if you haven't checked out all the new gear at Charlie Hustle, you need to go and do so now, because they have dropped so much good Big 8 throwback gear. The Big 8 drop was just, it was incredible. The Iowa State and Kansas State gear was so good. The Colorado skiing shirt. It's a skiing national championship. It's so fun. Like, I don't know how, if you're a Colorado fan, you're like, I want that. Look, the Big 8 gear was awesome. Now they've got gear for every one of the corner 4. And look, if I was going to like rank, since we're doing rankings, the Arizona stuff is phenomenal. I want the one of the old school cat with the hat on it. The ASU is great. Utah's fantastic. They have stuff for every current Big 12 school now, and they're not done. They're not done dropping new gear this summer. There's going to be more coming as we get closer to the football season. So just keep an eye on it. So what you need to remember is our promo code 101215, TEN1215, gets you 15% off all non-sale items. I've got stuff on sale that's really, really good. I've got that Big 8 gear. I need that green Big 8 conference t-shirt. They are going to restock that. I will be buying it as soon as I can. I've got my Big 12 shirt with the Kansas City skyline in the background, because of course they're based in Kansas City and they love the city of Kansas City. And there are a ton of great Kansas City gear if you're just a fan of that city and the sports teams that are there. They've got some Big 12 teams who aren't in the conference anymore. They've got stuff like that because of based where they're located. But they love the Big 12. That's why they make so much cool Big 12 stuff. It's why they had the privilege of promoting and creating Big 8 conference stuff. So go to charliehustle.com. Promo code 101215, TEN1215 for 15% off all non-sale items. Get yourself ready for the season. The Charlie Hustle Vintage Made Fresh. All right, we have both done 1 through 6. So that means we've got 7, 8, 9, 10 left to go. We'll keep going the way we've done this. Joe, who do you have at number 7?
So my list pretty much has been, who's going to make a big impact, who's going to drastically affect maybe bad teams or position groups that are slightly worse. This one is not the case. And I have Dylan Edwards for Kansas State. I think obviously you have DJ Giddens. That's not really a need at the running back position. It's just really hard for me to not see an undersized running back at Kansas State and not get really excited because of what we've seen in the past. Now, Dylan Edwards he's like 5'8". He's like, dwarfing Deuce Vaughn. So the fact that he comes in and fits that undersized, explosive running back, again, kind of nostalgia maybe creeped into this selection. But, how could you not, where you have this explosive running back who wanted to come back home, was supposed to go to Kansas State, and then obviously didn't. And now he comes back home, and you get to pair him with DJ Giddens in an offense that's going to run the football quite a bit. But now you have a weapon that you can utilize in the passing attack as well. And you saw, even if it was in limited time or in limited opportunities, you saw what Dylan Edwards is capable of doing. The speed is going to be a game changer. And for a team that is expected to compete for a Big 12 championship, you're going to need game changers for certain plays or certain times in games where you need a touchdown or you need a big play, and Dylan Edwards is that guy.
I don't have him on my list because I just can't put a backup running back, even if they are. He may overtake the backfield. He might. And I know Kansas State fans are very excited about him for good reason. You are the RB2. It's the same reason I don't have Penny Boone on this list, because you're going to be the backup to the guy that we're all very excited about. And I can be very excited about what you can do as the uppercut to the starter's right hook. Right. But I can't put the backup guy in here, but that's not a shot at him in any way, shape, or form. Is saying that he couldn't potentially be a massive player who has some big moments for Kansas State in some big games for them this season. So not against having him on the list, just didn't get to make the cut in mine. Number 7 for me, I don't have a lot of defense on this one. I didn't have a lot of defense. I don't know why I just didn't. But I do have for TCU, Caleb Elarms-Orr, linebacker who transferred in from Cal. I am very intrigued when you get somebody who comes in from Cal who is consistently a really good defense, was a second-team All-Pac-12. Last year, led the Golden Bears with 92 tackles, had just a phenomenal year. Had 6 quarterback hurries, 3.5 tackles for loss, sack, interception, fumble. Like that list of like, I've done it all. I've done everything at linebacker. I can do it all, and I'm going to have a big role at TCU this season. I think this is a big addition for TCU that's looking again for bounce back season after a disappointing year 2 there. I think he's going to have a big year. That was his first season last year at Cal. Coming into TCU, Andy Avalos is the new defensive coordinator, getting this piece in there. I think there are a lot of good linebackers in the Big 12 this year. I think the Nick Martin at Oklahoma State. I mean, were there on the first team, were there 3 or were there 4 linebackers? I think there might have been, which is insane. Like, also would have been perfectly fine if there were like 6. Like, linebacker to me, it's like it's the year of the linebacker on defense, the year of running back on offense in the Big 12. But like, I really do think that this guy is going to have a big impact for TCU this year. Like, this is one of those, like, this is the guy we all know. He has that kind of opportunity. Great at Cal, huge impact for TCU this year in a position where they need it.
Yeah, I think TCU's linebackers could be really fun this year. You obviously add him coming from, you have to give, I think that Justin Wilcox deserves a lot more love than he gets. And the fact that he's at Cal is probably why we don't talk about him unless we're talking, hot seat discussions. But his defense is,
offense, man. And it's like you go 5-7 and you probably should have gone 8-4, but
right.
The defense is awesome, but you don't score any points. Like,
yeah. The defense keeps them in games, and I don't know how they're going to do in the ACC this year, but I think that, TCU is glad that a couple guys are going elsewhere, and he's one of them. I think the linebackers will be much better than they were last year. You obviously get Johnny Hodges back. You have, what's his name now? I'm blanking. Is it Nnamdi Obiazor coming back, leading tackler for TCU? So you have guys that are going to be impact players. And I think with Avalos coming in, you maybe get a little bit of jolt to that side of the football. So
TCU feels like an absolute wild card this year because I don't think anyone knows what to expect from them. Like, you go from national championship to missing a bowl game. Somewhere in between feels right for them this year. I just don't know. All right. Number 8. I've done my 8. As I said, it was Josh Kelley, who we talked about earlier. Who do you have at number 8?
I have Tre Smith coming from San Jose State to Arizona. He follows Brent Brennan and had a big year in 2023. A very slept on transfer portal player, I think, in general. And I think a lot of power teams are going to wish that they added him. I think that he has good size to be able to handle life in the Big 12. And the fact that he knows what Brennan and that staff are expecting from the defense. I mean, to me, San Jose State's defense maybe wasn't the best statistically, but this was a tough group that is not going to quit. And Smith was a big part of that. And, 9.5 tackles for loss last year, 6.5 sacks on a defense. Like I said, I think the defense was kind of average statistically, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. If you go back and watch the film, I think they had a lot of players on that defense that were exceptional. And you now add them to Arizona, who does need a couple of edge players to step up after what they lost. The linebackers should be solid. So bringing in Smith, I think, was a really slept on addition and one that could be really fun for Arizona's defense.
All right. Like I said, I had Josh Kelley at 8. So at 9, Tell you what, we'll flip this since you just talked. I'll go 9 first, and then you can go 9. I have wide receiver Jaden Bray. As we know, people who follow us on Twitter, we love intra-conference transfers. Jaden Bray going from Oklahoma State to West Virginia. I have been a Jaden Bray believer for his entire career at Oklahoma State and just kept waiting for him to pop. And he had injuries here, and they were loaded on the depth chart, and it just never quite seemed to happen. I'm still really high on the potential for Jaden Bray at wide receiver. They were loaded at wide receiver at Oklahoma State. Like, he wasn't going to get the opportunity to get the snap count that he needed to really make that next big step. He couldn't. He will be atop the depth chart at West Virginia. He is going to have a big opportunity. And look, West Virginia is going to run the ball a lot with Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson, and Garrett Green runs a lot, but there's going to be more opportunity to me for him at West Virginia. So I hated to see him, another Oklahoma State player, I hated to see leave. I understand why he left, and I think there's so much potential for him at West Virginia to be their guy, to be their number one pass catcher. Whether that's just in reception total or yards, but I just like there's so much potential for him, and I've seen it his whole career. And I really think this is going to give him the opportunity to finally kind of start to get far closer to what I think he can be, which is going to be a big impact for a West Virginia team that, again, it's another team where West Virginia fans have high expectations. They had a great season last season. Questions about the schedule, like we're just not sure, but they are definitely in the mix there. He's the kind of guy that if he gets up to his level, I think he can play at, it can really take that West Virginia offense up another notch.
Yeah, I'm not as high on him as you are, but I've heard it I think the last couple of years. It's been, what is Jaden Bray capable of doing if he's on the field, if he's able to get the reps, get the opportunities. And obviously when he's had those opportunities, you've seen some really exciting things. It's just a matter of getting those. And I think West Virginia's passing attack returns quite a few options, but in terms of ceiling, I don't know if any of them have what Jaden Bray brings to the table. So that'll be really fun to watch West Virginia. Garrett Green's probably one of the biggest wild cards in college football at the quarterback position, just because we don't really know what he's going to do after a pretty solid season in 2023. So that West Virginia offense will be one that I'm definitely watching this year.
West Virginia is that team that just doesn't, like, no one seems to talk about West Virginia. Like, and I get it, it's hard. There's 16 teams in this conference now. There are 16 teams in this conference. You got 4 brand new, 4 that are in year 2. You had 5 teams get a first place vote. Like, there's so much going on. Everybody can't be talked about. And West Virginia, and as I mentioned TCU, like West Virginia is the team that can honestly be in the mixed, to me, that gets talked about the least. They've got so much on offense that is so interesting and so intriguing. Wyatt Millam on the offensive line. You've got Garrett Green, who might be the most underrated quarterback in the Big 12, which is saying a lot because there's a ton of underrated quarterbacks in the Big 12. That running back duo is fantastic. They don't get talked about as much because the best running backs get the carries and the bulk of the work in the Big 12, and they share more with Garrett Green, so they don't get as much talk. Like, West Virginia is a really interesting team this year that hopefully they can break that week 1 curse and pull off an upset that no one sees coming against Penn State, because that would get everybody talking about West Virginia. All you got to do is beat Penn State. Just go do that. That's not much. Okay. What is your number 9, Joe? Who do you got?
Number 9, I had him before I found out about Corey Platt being injured for the year. To me, Kendre Gant coming from Louisiana to Houston is going to be a big-time transfer, especially now that Platt is hurt. I think that this is a linebacker group that was, how do I say this nicely, bad, I'll just say. I think Houston's defense under Dana Holgorsen had like one good year, and then I don't know what happened. I couldn't tell you. They had talent. They had plenty of guys that were capable of playing well, and it's just everything just imploded, and it was just rough to watch. So bringing in Willie Fritz gives them kind of some new life. He brings in quite a few bit of talent from the state of Louisiana. And Kendre Gant, another, I don't know, I'm just a sucker for underrated, slept on transfers or underrated players in general. And he did literally everything for Louisiana. If you go back and watch his film, he's the definition of a playmaker. And obviously you're taking a step from the Sun Belt to the Big 12. So obviously that's a transition. But I think the staff is going to expect him to take on a bigger role. Now you lose a veteran player in Platt, and you need someone to step up. Gant is going to be one of those guys to probably step up as a leader, but also as a productive playmaker for a defense that didn't really have them the last couple of years.
I missed the Platt news. That sucks for Houston. And year one there, that's going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on. Okay. Number 10, our last one here on the list. And there was a few guys that didn't make the cut for me here. Obviously, 10. I'm intrigued by Kennard Snyder, defensive end, who transferred from ULM to Iowa State. He was really good at Louisiana Monroe, but of course that's one of those teams where they're not very good. So, guys who do great at a bad team, but you're going to a defense in Iowa State. Like if Iowa State thinks a team that doesn't bring in a lot of transfers, that you are worthy of coming to play defensive end on that defense, that's something that I'm going to trust that. Cincinnati quarterback, Brendan Sorsby. Part of this is just, I'm just not high on Cincinnati, but I do think, he can have a very big impact for them this season. I've seen a lot of people talking highly of Jalen Conyers, the tight end for Arizona State, who went to Texas Tech. We love interconference transfers. But the guy I picked for number 10, because I love offensive line, y'all. Like if you've listened to this podcast enough, the number one group we always made sure to hit in our position group rankings was offensive line. I love offensive line. I went with an offensive lineman who is taking over for a name that we all know very well. I'm taking Shane Bumgardner, new center for Kansas. He won the Remington Award as the top center in Division II. Yeah, he's coming from Division II last year. He's going to have to replace Mike Nowitzki in the middle of that offensive line. That is massive. Like, that is a massive role to take on a Kansas team where giant asterisk here, everyone. If Jam Daniel stays healthy, we'll finally see what Kansas can really, what could really happen with Kansas football this year. Could they make it to Arlington? Taking on the role of starting center for Kansas's offensive line and making sure you've got that relationship with Jalen Daniels, getting the snap count down right, protecting him there in the middle, trying to make sure he can stay healthy for an entire season. Like, I get it. It's a big jump to go from Division II to P5. Okay. If this guy is able to make that jump to take over that starting role from Mike Nowitzki, who was a really good offensive lineman for Kansas last year and the year before, it was there for a couple years. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. I had to put another offensive lineman in. That's who I've got at 10. Joe?
I like it. Yeah, I think that's going to be a tough role. I mean, it's just the experience that Nowitzki brought to the table. You just can't replicate that unless you bring in someone who has equal experience. But just even the fact that he has experience and he has experience on that team, it's so hard to replace. And especially at the center position, which is such a tough position to play. And now you're playing with a new quarterback, you're playing with new offensive linemen, a new team. That's obviously very, very challenging. I went the anti-U route. I went defense with this one. So to me, I put Deshawn Pace here. Coming from Cincinnati to UCF, he's going back to kind of a linebacker role. It's kind of a hybrid linebacker, defensive back role. But to me, Deshawn Pace's best position was in that hybrid, more of a linebacker, but still can function as a defensive back. Cincinnati used him as a linebacker early in his career, moved him to defensive back, kind of nickel back, safety. And now at UCF, he's going to play more closer to the line of scrimmage, linebacker / defensive back role, like I said, but more of that linebacker where he's an athletic player, someone who's capable of picking off passes, but also isn't afraid to make plays at the line of scrimmage. UCF defense, I think, is a group that needs to take a step forward. If that Big 12 championship is to become a reality, the defense needs to play better. They do have a good group up front that should be very disruptive and tough to block. And Deshawn Pace is going to be one of those guys, very quick off the ball, even if he's not the biggest linebacker, which nowadays linebackers big is like 235 pounds because that's the way the world is. But Deshawn Pace is someone who has that quickness, has that athleticism. So to me, I had like 15 guys for this last spot.
Right.
And I don't know how I picked. I just went with a name that fit a little bit because there's so many guys in this conference that I like coming in. But to me, Deshawn Pace just had that. He had everything else that all the other guys had, but then he's one of my favorite guys that I watched at Cincinnati, especially during their playoff run. So that to me gave him the edge to get that 10th spot.
Look, there's a ton of guys. Like you have 16 teams and everybody's taking a ton of transfers, and there's going to be a lot of guys who come in and make an impact. But like I think we've put together a list here of close to 20 guys, I think about 16, 17. That's a big chunk, and there's plenty of guys, like I said, that we couldn't get on this list. That UCF defense, man, that is going to be the difference. Like I'm not worried about the offense. At defense, if they have a good defense this year, the Big 12, this is the thing of the Big 12. Like if you're sure insert your favorite team is going to be in Arlington, like cool. And if they get there, then you get to be right. Awesome. Otherwise, like y'all just throw the papers in the air and fire an arrow, and whatever you hit, that's probably the championship game. Right? You hit 4 teams, and we've got to figure out the tie-breaking scenario, and God knows what that'll be. So, Joe, as always, it is an absolute joy and an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I love it every time. I love getting you on here every summer. We've got to do this more. We cannot go another 12 months before we talk again. So we're going to have to find a spot in the middle of the season to just get you on and get your thoughts. And we can talk about the transfers because I think this is fun. You do a great job breaking down rosters. As I mentioned to start things off, you've got a YouTube channel. You've got great breakdowns of a ton of teams. Where can everybody find that? Which Big 12 teams you got out? Which ones are coming? Let us know.
You can just find me using my name. I make it very simple for everyone, so it's not a bunch of different names to search for. In terms of Big 12 teams, now I have to go back and look. I just put out the Kansas State one. I know I have Iowa State for sure. Some of them are just top 10 lists because, this is not my full-time job, despite what people might think. So some of them I had to, cut it down and make the videos a little bit shorter. So I do have, Kansas State, Iowa State, West Virginia's out. Baylor is out. I'm trying to think of who else I've done at this point. Here it is. TCU is out. Houston's out. Arizona State, Colorado, UCF, and then I already mentioned everyone else. Still have quite a few of the rest of them. Cincinnati is coming up soon. Arizona and Oklahoma State will be in the deep dive series as well. I'm trying to think if I missed anybody, but pretty much every team is going to be done at some point if they have not been already.
Yeah, y'all go watch those. If you want to just watch your team, that's fine. Go check it out. Joe does a great job. As always, like I said, Joe, it's a pleasure. We'll get you back on again soon, man. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Follow Joe. Follow us on Twitter, 1012 Network, 1012 Pod on Threads and Instagram. If you are listening to this in podcast form the day after, 5 stars and a rating, please. We would really appreciate it. Don't forget to shop Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, 101215 for the promo code. Y'all who join us tonight to watch, Brian Metcalf, thanks as always for the comments. Appreciate it, man. Like I said, it's rankings week. We're doing this all the way through Thursday. We've got another ranking tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We've got great guests all week. So come back every night, 8 p.m. Central Time. We got this big week that we're going to take a little bit of break, but Joe, again, appreciate it. Everybody who watched live, thank you so much. If you're watching after, thank you as well. Leave us a comment. I'll try and get to it. We'll see you all again tomorrow night.